stories that we're going to be following in the weeks and perhaps months ahead is the fact that Benghazi is back as a huge political issue. Congressman Jason Chaffetz, you're on the House Oversight Committee. You've been one of the drivers, big critics of the president on this issue. Here was what you and others on the right called a smoking gun email that was released by the White House. Ben Rhodes, who is an advisor to the president, we'll put it up on the screen. These were talking points about Susan Rice's appearance on the Sunday programs after the attack, and the goal to underscore that these protests are rooted in an internet video and not a broader failure of policy. What have we suddenly learned, do you believe, and what is it helping us get to the bottom of?
Well, we want the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. And the White House has long denied any personal involvement in manipulation of those talking points. The reality is we have the CIA, we have the military, you have the State Department themselves that said that it was not a video. It was not.
They did say it was a spontaneous event where they were, and it was a logical conclusion to go to the video, right? But video was never used.
No, I totally disagree with that. I think that was a false narrative from the beginning. It was perpetuated over the course of the time. In my mind, that became a lie. It was never true in Libya. Look at what was happening in real time. And there was nobody that thought that there was a video that was causing a protest in Benghazi. Nobody.
But again, what I was referring to is that the Intelligence Committee does refer to a spontaneous event at the embassy in Cairo that evolved into a direct attack on Benghazi. And the argument by critics is this was a conflation of issues and the White House trying to obscure it and certainly trying to make the president look good and need it done. Well, and that was the subject of that email.
You know, David, that is unprecedented in the history of White Houses, okay? So
trying to make the president look good?
Well, or at least...
Or politicizing national security?
No, trying to get a coherent message out there on shows like yours. Let's take a step back here. It's been called a smoking gun. I think if you look at this email, it's a lot more like a leaky water pistol when it comes to it. There's not a lot that's new in here, and frankly, it's a broader kind of email that gets sent around probably every Friday, and then agencies fill in other things. There's nothing in there that's inconsistent with the emails that have been released before, and there's nothing in there that's inconsistent with what the CIA had written. And I think that, you know, this is a committee, with all due respect to the congressman, that has been looking for a scandal and conspiracy theories for the last 4 years, and there's a lot more theory here than there is conspiracy.
Let me get Kathleen on this point in terms of what you see in the overall here.
Well, I think the important point is whether the White House tried to, well, in the beginning, the White House said we really had nothing to do with these talking points. These were from other agencies, and it's clear that there was some communication within the White House about how to handle the narrative. And the congressman was showing me a little bit earlier in the green room that there was, you know, the date of the document. Well, I should let you say it because you're the one with the documents. But
I'm trying to get to the overall point. Let me bring in Chuck here because the argument, I'll get back to you, Congressman. The central charge by critics is that the White House failed to call this what this was from the get-go, which was a terrorist attack. And the criticism is that they relied on a narrative about a video that would have been a lot more convenient for the White House to advance because it would help them say, look, we were just trying to deal with a spontaneous situation rather than being caught unawares by a terror attack. And they, of course, have said, look, we had an intelligence community telling us that these were the factors at play. A spontaneous event, David Petraeus initially saying on the Hill it was not terrorism related. So I'm giving some of that backdrop to try to pull back and say, what are we trying to get to the bottom of here?
Well, and that's what sort of is the talking points the scandal? Or is it the fact that 4 people died in Benghazi, that we didn't necessarily have good intelligence on the ground? Was this a case of interagency CYA that was going on, that if you logically look at this, it clearly is between state and CIA, whether it's because state is uncomfortable letting the world know that the CIA really does use a lot of State Department outposts for their own operations? Was it the fact that the CIA didn't want to admit that it didn't know what was going on the ground? I think what makes it hard and why there's such a disconnect between the two parties on whether Republicans truly believe this is a scandal and Democrats are like going, I don't understand, because 2 days later you had somebody going on Capitol Hill saying this was a terrorist attack. So the question is, do you believe that Saturday and Sunday, right before, do you believe that the White House somehow knew it was a terrorist attack and wasn't ready to admit it and falsely went out there and decided to push it onto the video? Or do you believe at that moment in time They were still sort of shaken by what was going on in Yemen, what was going on in Egypt, and all of this stuff at that time. And then, so I think that seems to be the central sort of disagreement here. Do you believe that they were intentionally misleading that weekend, and then Tuesday they come back and say, yes, terrorist attack?
Here's one of the fundamental problems I have. I have a document in my hands, an internal State Department document that goes to Cheryl Mills, Hillary Clinton's chief of staff. This is on September 12th. The State Department had told the president of the Libyan Congress that it was Ansar al-Sharia, a terrorist organization that had committed these attacks. So why is it that we told the Libyans the truth and told the American people a lie? That's right at the heart of that. What happened, for instance, as journalists, you do not know the answer as to why was the ambassador there. What happened, for instance, on April 6, 2012, when our facility was bombed? It was bombed again on June 6 of 2012. The British ambassador had an assassination attempt. What did Secretary Clinton do to secure that facility? Because when you have the regional security officer, this is our lead security person, come and testify before Congress and say he felt like the Taliban was in the inside of the State Department, are we just supposed to sit back and...
And we do know that security has been well established, that this was a huge issue, Kathleen, and an issue, frankly, that whether people deem it as fair or not, that if Secretary Clinton is the nominee, she's going to face these questions.
Yeah, she's going to definitely have to face them. And you know, the defense from the administration all along has been, look, we wouldn't have been able to do anything. We couldn't have gotten there in time. But of course, at the time, you didn't know how much time. No, but it's not like the terrorists dropped by and said, look, this is going to take 20 minutes. Don't bother. The other thing we have to remember is that this was in the days leading up to the 2012 election, and this could have been a tipping point. And so there is question. I mean, I think it's fair to question: was there a delay in acknowledging this as a terrorist attack in order to protect?
I do want to jump in here, though, because first of all, the Oversight Committee on Thursday had a hearing in which the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, a committee that has looked very carefully into this question of, the supporting whether military forces could have gotten there in time, actually did the very rare thing of disagreeing with a fellow Republican chairman, with Chairman Issa, over the committee they had on Thursday and hearing they had. David, when something like this happens, which unfortunately happens when you have people stationed in unstable and dangerous parts of the world, in retrospect, it is always easy to say, should have known this, and we learned that during the Bush administration, and unfortunately we learned that during this one with a bipartisan investigation of this. The reality of this is when something like this happens in those first 48 to 72 hours, you don't know, and you have to go with what your intelligence agencies tell you.
Let me ask you a political question. How big of an issue will this be for Hillary Clinton as a candidate?
I think it's impossible for any of us to say how big of an issue it will be. I can tell you that I think should Hillary Clinton decide to be a candidate for the nomination, she'll be prepared to deal with this, and she'll be prepared to deal with it as she did on Capitol Hill, and as this administration has dealt with it, transparently and telling the truth.
Litmus test for her, Jason Chaffetz?
Well, it's key. I mean, what did she do? Our facility was bombed 2 times. What did the secretary do? The reality is we had 30 security personnel. And by the time we got down to the end of August, that number had dwindled down to 9.
So here's what I feel.